I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm not going to read some prepared statement. I'm really getting tired to listen to some of these press conferences where there's like a prepared statement, and at the end of it, I was like, nothing was said. I keep hearing more and more transparency, except when they talk, apparently. So I'm just going to go through a few things that we have concerns about, and then I'm sure you'd be more interested to ask questions. But I want to just put you back to a couple things to think about. Number one, in the back of your mind, I want to talk about how City Council talked about defunding, how one council member talked about a 50% defunding, how that works in comparison to how we're actually staffed and manned right now. And last weekend is a great example. I can give you some of those numbers. When you talk about the defunding, I think we passed out some sheets that told you how our hiring's going and how our retirements are going, and at the lack of staffing we have now. We have brownouts, because that's really what it is, in car beats all over the city, every shift, every day. We have a department email system that you really can't figure out. You should be getting information on, but it's hard to find any information on it because every other email is a request from some platoon asking for someone to come in to work overtime or opportunities out there. And they become almost a new way of enticing people. A great opportunity for you and your family. Come work overtime, right? It's getting to a point that they can't even get people to cover the shifts that they got to cover. And we're not even in the hottest part of the summer yet. And this is what we're facing. And I think you see the results of what's going on in our neighborhoods as well. How does that work? And then on top of everything else, I've heard a lot about changes in reform. I've spoke a lot about changes in reform. I hear people talking, but I don't hear nothing. I hear things about police-community relations and setting up panels and committees. And you know what? Look back in the last few years. All these panels, all these committees that they put together, they have police chiefs on them. It shouldn't be police chiefs when you talk about community policing. Community policing is about the cop in the neighborhood. That's community policing. They talk about it. You look at chiefs, they look like they're a chief. They talk like, well, they talk more like a police information officer because they just talk. I don't see any actions. I don't see any leadership. I don't see any new initiatives that are going to get us to a better place. They just keep talking about it. They talk about transparency for so long you get nauseous over it, yet they never tell you something that's transparent. Meanwhile, we still have the problems going forward. We have 50A. I found out from you people that there might be a database put together for the city website. Some of you have heard what I've said before about 50A. I think it's long overdue to have reforms and changes to it. It should have been something that was worked out for certain protections. In fact, I think on a national level, we should have the appeal of protection of all records and personnel files. And I don't want it to stop at cops. If I'm going to see a doctor tomorrow, I want to know if he killed 10 people last week, or if my dentist has botched up a number of proceedings, or anybody else. Someone gets fired from a university. Why? Why not be transparent? Why not put it in place? What we're going to see in New York State is not what some people or advocates have been talking about for so long. They go to seminars and conventions or wherever in other parts of the country that do not have state civil service laws and do not have what we have in a unionized state. When 50A and those files start going out, everyone's going to be shocked. Right now, in our department, I can't go back and name 5 hearings that we've even had in the last 20 years. If we've had 5, that's a lot. Most of our disciplinary matters are settled by officers having to take pleas to a chief. And you know why? Because in New York State, it's a recommendation and determination from a hearing officer to a chief. Oh, you can ask for a hearing, and if you believe adamantly that you're not guilty, you can go to a hearing. And very often, what we'll hear back, oh, you can take 30 days. Not retraining, not change policy, not do things to make somebody better or to grow. You take 30 days, or you go to a hearing, and I'll terminate you. That's what occurs. And what will come out of most of these files are the settlements. You want to talk about concerns that cops are getting terminated and getting hired in other departments? Go ahead. It's police chiefs that hire and fire, not police unions. We have no say in the matter. If somebody's hiring them, then you should ask that police chief why they hired them. But you're not going to find it in New York State. We do not have arbitration, so you can't grieve a termination. Those are all right-to-work states that have those matters. We have an Article 78 court proceeding that is so narrow in scope, I challenge anyone to put a list of cops who have challenged their terminations and got their jobs back. It's all nearly impossible, except for just the narrowest of reasons on it. We saw last week what's going on in this city. We've seen this rise in violence for the last couple of years. We talked about the number of guns. We talked about the inability to have enough people to take care of it, and you're starting to see the results. But I want to go back 1 week before that. We had a situation where officers saw what they believed to be somebody that was having some problems and took action with that individual. They had somebody come out with a cell camera and get right on top of these officers. The officers said, we don't care if you're filming. We get filmed every day, every hour. Get away from us. Get back from us. You can't get that close to us. When you're close enough to touch an officer, you're close enough to take their gun. You're close enough to hit them in the back of the head. That's a safety issue that we face. An issue comes. So the transparency of our department tells you nothing other than, well, you can't prosecute an obstructing governmental administration. Okay, then what do you do? That occurred on the 28th. On the 29th, I sent an email to the chief. I asked real simple. Okay, what are our officers supposed to do? You're the chief. You're the expert. Tell us your opinion or give us a directive. If someone is too close, if we feel in fear for the safety of our lives, what should we do? This came from our members asking a simple question. Oh, there'll be some directives put out. There was nothing put out. There was the OGA case ruling on you can't make an arrest. Okay, so while people sit in their offices Monday through Friday, and we have officers out on the street that get into situations where they're surrounded, where people get too close to them, what do? If they take an action, then a chief comes to the rescue and says, when we're right, we're right, and we're wrong. What does the officer do? What action does he take? Last weekend, we saw exactly that. Setting up a crime scene, protecting the shooting scene. We investigate crimes because people are victims of violent crime. Their families and each of them deserve to have an investigation done and the person who harmed them brought to justice. What happens? Officers get attacked inside of a crime scene. The answer is what? As long as you've got a camera in your hand, oh, I'm just filming. There's nothing wrong with filming. And if I walk up with that and then I decide to do something else, the officers are at a high risk. When we have issues in the community, then tell the officers what you want them to do or not do. Don't tell them to follow your training and follow general orders. tell them specifically that's what we've been asking for. Since June 1st to today, we've had just in personnel shortages 3,024 hours that had to be covered. Just in 4th of July weekend, from Friday to Sunday, we had 194, almost 200 officers working on overtime outside the normal duty hours to cover shortages over the weekend at about almost 1,700 hours of overtime. We have officers working way, way, way too many hours, and they're getting burned out, and they're getting tired. When they're tired, they can have simple mistakes. Let me tell you about a mistake. A mistake is when the chief of police or somebody in the administration does something that's wrong. It's a mistake. When a police officer makes a mistake, it's misconduct. If we're gonna get to a better place, then we have to give our people, the people out there doing the job, the ability to be successful. We can't demoralize them or demean them unless you don't want them. And you're seeing what it's like to defund a police department. You're getting the front line on it. And what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks is what will continue to happen. I see city council members that talk about this would be a good example of somebody highly trained in mediation to have been there and taken care of the problem. They never even saw the video of that situation. Nobody follows up, and anybody can say anything they want. Why isn't the chief showing you the video, explaining it? We hire police chiefs so they can be the experts. So be an expert. When something occurs, give an opinion. Speak to it. And if the investigation turns out to have a different conclusion, then so be it. You're going to do an investigation either way. But you need to let the public know that everything appears to be right or if there is a problem. There's a constant demand to simply terminate or suspend. Well, think about any other profession where you're reviewed or called into question on something you do. It's called process, and you're entitled to that. When something is so extremely wrong, then certainly take an action. But in the last couple of years, over and over again, we had officers simply suspended, nothing given to the public. What do their families, what do their friends think? Only the worst? And then after months, sometimes years, they come back to work and there's no sustained charges or nothing of significance. They got to fight to come up with a charge to justify why they kept them out of work so long. And that happens in every occasion. It's about time that we call the people to task who are making poor decisions. And it's not the police officers on the street. It's the people that are deciding, making the decisions and putting the rules out there. And some of them have no law enforcement experience whatsoever. And it's time to let a chief be a chief. If they can't, get a new one. And get somebody that can make a decision, and get somebody who's not afraid to tell the public what's going on out there. We don't need to tell people in the suburbs. The people in the neighborhoods in the city knows what's going on. And the last couple weeks, I've heard nothing but my members tell me about the neighborhoods telling them, we need you, we need more of you. We got a few voices in this community that have no experience, have no idea what they're talking about, couldn't explain 50A or couldn't explain civil service, couldn't explain Section 14, the Taylor Law, if their life depended on it. But for some reason, they're getting a following, and we got council members who follow and say, this is the answer. It's not the answer. I'm sorry. I went on probably longer than I should have, but I'll leave it open to any questions that you had.
I have a quick question. So regarding 50A and criminal internal affairs investigations. From my understanding, you're mandated to answer questions or you could be fired. Do you feel like police officers should have the same rights as a civilian to have the right to remain silent and have an attorney?
Well, it's a great question. What I believe, I think in law enforcement there's a need to have compelled statements. However, you should then have the right to have a fair process that's binding. I advocated changes for 58 for the last few years, and part of what I said was, let's make changes to it, but let's also make sure due process is taken care of and make everything better and have a hearing officer who has binding power and take the politics out of this department. We had an officer terminated a couple of months ago that should not have been terminated. A hearing officer gave him 5 days based on the hearing. And a police chief came back and terminated him with his opinion of it, who didn't sit for 10 minutes, not even 1 minute, in that hearing. How is that right? How is that fair? We have to make the profession better. We have to make it better here. We can't keep looking at states that don't have the laws that we have. It was unions that got collective bargaining rights in this state in 1970 and started to set standards, hiring standards and training standards. Cities, municipalities, and chiefs did not want to spend money for training. It was police unions that demanded that, to make it a profession. New York State is lucky in that sense. What we have in Rochester should be an example, but it's been tainted to be the worst of the worst, and that's so wrong. I go around the country, and I have my peers telling me, how do you have that problem in Rochester? When I show them the numbers, that anyone can look at the data, and decisions should be made by what the data drives. We take 300,000 calls per service. We average 16 to 18 citizen complaints a year. How much better can you get someone to be? And then understand, most of them are procedural issues. We deal with people in very heightened stages. It's not an easy job.
What's your reaction to this online database?
I have no idea. I think that we have to be careful. 50A is a joke in one sense. In a criminal proceeding in New York State, the defense attorneys have access to disciplinary records. The judge started out just showing them into the chambers to in the last couple of years where they were just giving them to the defense. So those records are out there. When we go to an internal, the hearing officer has those recommendations that he can infer on his recommendation for punishment as well. It doesn't do anything in the sense of protecting any bad cops. That's the biggest misinformation that's out there. What should not be put out there is everybody's personnel files. Or are you going to put out the stuff that they do that is acts of bravery and acts of accommodations and every other thing out there? But over the course of 20 years, if you have a couple procedural issues, I really think that there's some out there that think we got like serial killers and it's going to come out. Well, it's not going to come out. And that's why I say to my peers, do not be afraid of it, engage in it. Let's just protect certain parts of privacy. Should we have, would you want all your personnel files so your next door neighbor to look at them if you have a neighborhood complaint problem, or to just post them on social media for whatever reason or purposes? How does someone get a fair due process when they're involved in some incident that nobody has any of the facts of, but you're going to just paint a certain picture of them? It's very dangerous. I don't see the purpose for it.
So I want to be clear, Mike. So your concern about an online database would be that it would be out of context for someone looking at it? What are the kind of like 2 or 3 major concerns you have?
Well,
kind of concise on that.
Well, Patty, first, I just heard of this through the media. I also said to the department that I would demand to negotiate the process and procedures of how those records are going to be distributed. That's important. You say, why? Oh, you want to make sure nothing bad? No. When we have a case when an officer is injured, and we ask for medical records, and we get releases for them, and we get them, and we start going through the files, and all of a sudden we find another member's information tucked in. Mistakes are made all over the place. My fear and my concern is that the documentations that are going to be open to the public are accurate, that they're complete, and they're not someone else's records, and so forth. Or they shouldn't be there to whatever the criteria is in place, which is the big question now. There's coalitions across the state that are looking at this, and I'm sure there's going to be legal actions. This was ripe to have taken place, but it was done wrong. There should have been public hearings in Albany. There should have been the ability for police leadership, police unions, for the public to come and speak to those hearings. The people that drafted that were going off of information they got out of Section 75. They don't understand. They don't understand it any more than any city council member that even took one step inside of our professional standards section or even looked firsthand to see what our internal process is, but are adamant that we need an accountability board and everything else. You want to defund us, or we need money for services, then let's look at city council. Let's look at 9 people that work part-time that get a pretty high salary in addition to their health care and to a pension, to training, to travel, and to a whole other list of money. Let's see how much they spend in a year. Instead of taking cops off the street where I think people in the neighborhood say we need more cops, maybe we could reduce their budget and put it into something that they believe can help. And anything that can help us, we are there with. If there's mental health clinicians that can come out and help us. But be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And by the way, we work holidays. So put it in place. And we're all for it. We didn't have to deal with that level until they started emptying out group homes and facilities in the state. And then whose shoulders did it get put on?
Do you believe that some officers might not be as forthcoming when it comes to, talking about what happened, knowing the fact that this information will be released to the public?
Well, how can you not be forthcoming? There's body-worn cameras, there's poll cameras, there's cell phones, there's a compelled statement, there's a million witnesses. It's an interrogation setting and with a stenographer. We get so many levels of review. The problem is it's never done correctly. I can go back in 10 years of negotiating contracts here and show you a number of different proposals. Some is on educational-based discipline or ways to do other things other than just time off. So politically, you can say you discipline someone. If a person has a problem and you give them 5 days off, in 5 days, do they come back and not have a problem? That's not further advancing someone. That's not stopping or changing an undesirable action or procedure or practice. It doesn't exist. It's nothing more than police chiefs to protect their inability to be leaders in a department. When was the last time they made changes to training? They only react when there's something that blows up in the public, and then they become heroes. They tell our people, go out and be tough on crime. And then when something happens, the answer is be tough on the cop who is following your orders. It's easier to push blame than to accept blame. And it's time we start doing it from the top down. When the police accountability all started, we told them the issues and the problems we had. It's not the discipline. Right now, a chief has ultimate authority to do whatever he wants. What can a board do any better than that? If you got a problem, at least look internally to see what is causing the problem and hold people accountable. This is This is a list of the overnight calls from Friday to Sunday. Those officers out there should be commended for the work they did that weekend, for the lives they saved that weekend. And then to be attacked for no reason because of what's going on across this country. We're going to make it better, then we got to start right here and give the people who are empowered to protect people in the neighborhoods that ability to do it safely and give them the resources and the numbers they need to get the job done. And if we don't get it done, then come back and hold us accountable. That's what it's about. Good?
You have a sheet with the numbers? We got hired and retired and you have this, you have.
What else you want?
So there were the number of calls? What did you just?
Oh, you want that information? Can you make, yeah, we'll make copies. We'll give everybody a copy on it, the numbers there. I hand wrote them on it, so we'll make copies and give them to you on that. You can see what we're facing, though, in terms of our hiring. So now you got rational members of City Council that have said, now, we're going to cut the class in half. Read down below. I have no idea how we're going to man car beats next summer. I don't think we can get through this summer on those numbers. It's that simple. Nobody wants our job. Anybody hiring? I'll pass the word around.
Not in this one, in the group.
Right.
You need some rain. You need rain of biblical proportions.
We really do.
Whole week.
Yeah. Yep. I just don't want anybody to get hurt.